Hello, welcome. For those of you who don't know who I am, we haven't met yet. My name is Michelle Hughes. I am a coach, a widow, a mom, a yaya, and a woman who has had to learn most of this by living it. And today we're talking about self-leadership. My hope today is that you leave with two things. First, a shift in perspective about the world we live in, and second, a stronger belief in your ability to lead yourself well within it. And I want to begin with a quote that has stayed with me for a while now. It's by American author and theologian Frederick Buechner from his 2004 book called Beyond Words. And here's the quote. "Here's the world. Beautiful and terrible things will happen. Do not be afraid." When I first read those words, something in me settled, because I think many of us have been taught over the years without even realizing it to believe that life is hard. Then that means that something has gone wrong, right? That if we are doing life well, it should feel mostly happy, mostly safe, mostly manageable. But that really isn't reality. Life is both beautiful and hard. And until we make peace with that, until we understand that both beautiful and terrible things will happen, I don't know that we can truly lead ourselves well. Because self-leadership begins when we stop expecting life to be easy and start learning how to lead ourselves in the middle of what is, whatever that is. And the truth is, this isn't just human insight. It's also a spiritual truth. Because John 16:33 tells us, "In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world." Not might, not maybe, you will have trouble. And I think there is something strangely freeing about that, right? I mean, if we just take a minute to take that in, it kind of gives me chill bumps when I say it out loud, because that is really saying it's okay. Everything isn't going to be great all the time, right? Because when we stop expecting a trouble-free life, then we stop interpreting hardship as failure. We stop assuming something has gone wrong. And we begin to understand that hard things are not evidence that life is broken. Hard things are just part of life. And being good at self-leadership begins when we learn not to be undone by that. Don't be undone by hard things, but to lead ourselves through it. And we don't have to take to the bed, as my coach says, which I have done in my life. And once we understand that hard things are just part of life, it's not evidence that something has gone wrong, then something interesting starts to happen. We begin to see why so many of us feel stuck. Not because we're lazy, not because we're incapable, not because something is wrong with us, because somewhere along the way, we were taught, probably without even realizing it, that we were supposed to wait for life to feel better before we begin moving forward. We were supposed to wait to feel motivated, or wait to feel confident, or wait to feel clear, or to have clarity. We wait for things to settle down. We wait for the fear to go away. And while we're waiting, life keeps moving on, right? And so do the years. And I know that because I have lived it. There was a season in my own life when I realized I had been waiting for life to feel lighter, waiting to feel more certain, waiting for some outside clarity to tell me what was next. And what I began to see, quite honestly, was that some of what I called discernment was really just delay. Some of what I called being careful was actually fear. And that was really hard to admit to myself. But it was also freeing because the moment I could name it, then I could begin to try to change it, right? And for me, that was a turning point. Not because everything changed overnight, but because I stopped waiting for life to move first. So many times we do that. I stopped waiting for life to move first and began taking responsibility for how I was going to lead myself within it, no matter what was in front of me. And that changed more than I realized it would. And I think this is where so many women quietly drift, not because they don't care, but because they have confused waiting with wisdom. And those are not the same thing, my friend. They're not. Because there is a difference between discernment and delay. There is a difference between thought reflection and hiding. And self-leadership begins when we learn to tell the difference. And this is where I believe everything begins, with how we think. Because the thoughts we allow, the thoughts we rehearse, the thoughts we believe, they shape everything. There are facts in all of our lives, facts about our circumstances, facts about our history, facts about what has happened to us or what hasn't. Those facts are very real. But the meaning we attach to those facts, the perspective we choose to have, the thoughts we practice about them, those shape everything. Because the thoughts create feelings. Feelings influence our actions. Actions produce results. And over time, those results begin shaping the life that we live. Because what begins as a thought can become a life. Think about that for a minute. What begins as a thought can become a life. The things that you're thinking right now, do you want those to become your life? Some of mine, no. Yeah. And I want you to hear this deeply. You may not always have control over your circumstances, but you do always have agency. And that matters because agency is where hope lives. You do have influence. You do have choice because you always have power over three things: your thoughts, your feelings, your actions. I'm going to say those again in case you weren't quite paying attention. We always have power over three things: your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions. That is where self-leadership begins. And I don't believe that it's simply self-help. I believe that is also deeply spiritual because Psalm 139, which is one of my most favorite chapters of the Bible, tells us we are intentionally formed, wonderfully made, known by God. And Romans 12:2 tells us we can be transformed by the renewing of our minds, which means change is possible. Renewal is possible. New patterns are possible. And this is where I use something we call the creation cycle. Thoughts, feelings, actions. These produce your results. And sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply stop and evaluate. What am I thinking right now? What is that thought making me feel? What action is that feeling producing? And are those actions creating a result that's actually serving me well? Because if not, guess what? I can choose again. You can choose again. That is what agency is. That is self-leadership. And this is where I ask women to get honest. Is this the version of me I want to become? Is this the version of you want to become? Would our 80-year-old self be proud of how we're showing up right now? Would she? Is this the woman I want my children or grandchildren to see? Is this the woman that I really want to be? If that answer is no, then you have some work to do. But you cannot look at that as condemnation. It's awareness. And awareness is where change begins. Because so often the thoughts that are leading us are not even our truest thoughts. They're fear, protection, old patterns, the false self. Thoughts like, I'm not enough. I can't do that. What will people think? But then there's a true self, which looks more like the self that of us that is grounded in truth. The self rooted in who God says you are. You're capable, you're growing, you're courageous. And self-leadership is learning to recognize the false self and choose the true self on purpose. Take that false self thought captive and make a decision on purpose out of your true self, who God says you are. Because self-leadership is not becoming someone else. It's not. It's not a brand new you. It's not someone else. It's becoming more fully who you were created to be. And when you start doing that, your brain will resist. It will. Because the brain is wired for safety, not growth. It will offer excuses, doubt, fear. It will want you to stay in the familiar, even if the familiar is keeping you stuck. And that is why resistance is not proof you're doing it wrong. Sometimes resistance is proof that you're growing. And can we just be honest? When you decide to do something new, your brain can get real dramatic, right? Suddenly it's like, what if you fail? What if people judge you? What if you embarrass yourself? Those thoughts are all very real. I have them, you have them. And somehow, that same brain that forgot why you walked into the pantry has very strong opinions about why you should not change your life. And yet, we let that brain run the board meeting, right? Yeah, we don't want to do all those things. That's why we have to take our thoughts captive. That's why we need to exercise agency. That's exactly my point. Not every thought that shows up deserves authority. Just because your brain offers a fearful thought does not mean you have to agree with it. It can sit over here in the passenger seat with you, but it isn't driving the car and it isn't adjusting the radio, right? And that is why you need a grounding truth, an anchor belief stronger than fear. Something meaningful enough to hold on to when your old patterns start talking. It could be something like, 10 years from now, I'll be proud I made a different choice. Or, I am becoming the woman I was created to be. That becomes your why. And meaning helps you move through discomfort. And this is where my framework comes in. Pray, plan, go. Pray. Align your heart with God. Spend time with Him in prayer and in His Word. Build a relationship with Him. That's what He wants. Ask Him to align your desires with His will for your life. That's Him giving you the desires of your heart, right? Plan. Get intentional. Break it down. 90 days at a time, every month, every week, every day. Put it in a planner. Put it in a planner. My planner's not handy right here. Put it in a planner. Schedule your life, because vague intentions do not create change. Specific action does, though. Then, you guessed, go. Take the step, even imperfectly. As my own coach says, B- work beats nothing every single time. Every single time. And this is where daily integrity comes in. Because every time you keep your word to yourself, you build trust with yourself. And building trust with yourself creates the confidence needed to make meaningful change. And when self-trust grows, confidence grows. And when confidence grows, guess what? You begin to show up differently. Yes, you do. And one more thing, gratitude matters. Because if you are never grateful, you will not suddenly be grateful later. Gratitude grounds you in abundance while you build what's next. And this brings me back to where we began. Beautiful and terrible things will happen. Do not be afraid. You, my friend, were created to handle both. You were created to lead yourself well, And my hope today is that you leave watching this video knowing this. You do not have to keep living as though you are powerless. You do not have to keep waiting for life to change before you begin changing how you lead yourself within it. You can begin with one thought, one decision, one act of courage, one next step. And for some of you, that next step may simply be taking what you heard today and beginning to practice it. And that's good. That's great. But for some of you, you may know that you want support doing this work at a deeper level. If that is you, I do have a few openings for one-on-one coaching, and I'd be honored to walk alongside the right women in that next step.